March 28th meeting of the Humor Farm Toastmasters Club. Today we're doing a special event. We have a special guest, Dennis Dawson, who will present some tips and techniques on doing better evaluations. So I'd like to call this meeting to order. We are now officially open for business. And with that, I would like to turn things over to the person who did the lion's share of the work putting this event together, who is a true powerhouse in Toastmasters in terms of her energy level and her ability to get things done. Humor Farm's own Terry No. Terry, please take it away.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening to you all. Are you guys ready to become better evaluators and wow the judges and your club members? First, I'd like to thank you everyone for joining us today, especially from Australia, Ethiopia, Europe, India, Papua New Guinea, Canada, China, South America, and of course, all across the United States. Thank you to our very own District 29 in Northern Virginia leaders, Jonathan Kaufman, Yvonne Vaughn, Kelly Winner, and Margaret Juan for supporting us. And our neighboring district, 18, 27, and 36 for coming out and supporting us as well. I would like to acknowledge Jenny Liu, a distinguished Toastmaster based in New York, for indirectly introduced me to our guest speaker. She just sponsored an international online club called Virtual Parliamentarian in District 46 in New York, and I hope you have a chance to visit her club soon. Thank you to our fellow Toastmaster to act as guest evaluators. We appreciate that very much. And thank you to our own club members for stepping up and taking on roles even after having to attend back-to-back contests yesterday. I'm sure you're tired. And thank you, Tracy, our club member, for representing our club yesterday at the contest and placed. We're very proud of you. How do you know whether what we say in a conversation or in a speech is any good or effective? Wouldn't it be great to have someone on our side all the time and guide us? Well, fortunate for us, we do have that with Toastmaster every week or every other week. The eye spot, the center part of a peacock's feather, grows as this magnificent bird matures. And just like this eye spot, its beaker will become more beautiful and more attractive with support from his or her supporters, the evaluators. Likewise, the evaluator become more attractive and more appreciative as well. Our guest speaker has graciously and generously guided many of his fellow Toastmasters over the years in becoming effective evaluators, whether it's in contests, in club level, just as more in their careers. He's a distinguished Toastmaster, not once, but twice, past district governor of District 57 in Silicon Valley, California. He's currently an area director and club extension chair in District 57. He's a past district champion of evaluation, humorous, and tall tale contests. By day, he's a writer and educator. And during the holidays, he plays Santa Claus in the park. And there's the past year, because of the pandemic, he had over 150 virtual visits. And that made a lot of kids happy. We're grateful to have him here today with us. Please welcome Dennis Dawson.
Wow, I want to meet that guy sometime. He sounds awesome. All right, let's make sure that I'm sharing my slides. Shoot, if someone would say, yes, we see your slides, that would help me.
Yes, we see
We
your
see
slides.
it.
Excellent,
Yeah.
thank you. I hate the way the windows blow up every time you change the screen. There we go. Hello, hello. And please do feel free to turn your video on. That way I can see when you're getting bored, and I'll move on to the next point. Very quickly. A lot of people think that if you have a lot of video on that it slows Zoom down somehow. Trust me, that does not happen. Has absolutely no impact on bandwidth or performance. So please let me see your shining faces and I will shine back at you. We're going to talk today about how to give winning evaluations. So first off, we're going to talk about giving effective evaluations in the club setting. Then I'll move on to talk about the difference between giving contest evaluations and giving your normal club evaluations. Then we're going to have some fun evaluating evaluators. So we'll have a couple of test speakers and I will demonstrate the way I would evaluate those speakers. I won't be able to give you a clean, polished evaluation the way I would for a contest, because then I would have to take the 5 minutes and we would all have to be quiet. What I'll do instead is walk you through the process I would go through as I was thinking through how I was going to deliver the evaluation. The last exercise, we'll have another test speaker and we'll have several guest evaluators and I will evaluate their evaluations. Lots of fun. I'm going to talk very quickly through a whole bunch of slides because I keep adding to this presentation and it takes more time and more time. That's fine. So hold your questions until I have my slide that comes up, any immediate questions, and then you can ask the questions at that point. Feel free to type them into chat, but I won't respond to them until I get to that point in the presentation. Okay, let's get started. First of all, always remember, evaluations are the heart of Toastmasters. By that I mean they're core to what we do, but it's also the way we show each other how we care. Now, evaluations are going to benefit the speaker because they get the feedback, of course, and it's nice. It's immediate feedback, not every 6 months when the boss comes in and dumps a bag of feedback over your head. You get this immediate feedback that you can put to use the next week. And that's unique to Toastmasters. Some people pay $1,500 to go for a weekend seminar where they're going to learn their speaking skills. We get that same preparation, but we get it week after week after week. And it's the continuous feedback that makes Toastmasters such a powerful program. You're going to get the suggestions for improvement, and it's also going to lift you up, build your self-esteem so you keep coming back for more. But it also benefits the evaluator. We get to work on our critical thinking skills. We learn how to give feedback that people will actually listen to and employ in their own lives. And we learn how to do it in a way that makes them feel good about themselves, that they can pass forward to make other people feel good about themselves as well. So that's the speaker and the evaluator, but the truth is everybody in the room benefits from a good evaluation. They listen to the speech, they listen to a good quality evaluation, and then they think through, would I have given that same feedback? What would I have added? What was unique to that evaluation that I can use in the future? So this is the core of Toastmasters. Many people have been resistant to the Pathways program. And I have to say this to you. There is a train that went through and it had a big sign on the side that said Pathways. You can stand on the platform and watch it go by. You can jump on the train and ride along. You can stand in the middle of the tracks and try to stop it, but that train's going through. Pathways is Toastmasters. Toastmasters is Pathways. And if you are not giving a speech based on criteria from a lesson that an evaluator can use to give you feedback based on that criteria, then you're paying $45 every 6 months for nothing. You're not getting the benefit of the Toastmasters program. So this is why we have the lessons with the criteria that we use to give helpful feedback that enables us to continually grow. And if anybody ever lets anybody do a free speech in Toastmasters, you're robbing the speaker, you're robbing the evaluator, and you're robbing all of the members of the club that are in attendance at that meeting. This is why all speeches must be pathway speeches, just like they used to have to be manual speeches to be an effective Toastmasters club. Now, before the speech, you want to talk to the speaker, find out what their objectives are for the lesson, and then talk to them about their areas of special interest. What would they specifically like for you to be watching for as they give the speech? They might be giving a speech on, and the criteria is vocal varieties, but they are also interested in their body language this time. So do my gestures match my vocal variety? And you can be watching for that too. There's no reason you have to stick to just the requirements of the lesson, as long as those are met as well. During the speech, this is my number one bugaboo. You have to pay attention. You have to look at the speaker every now and again. I get so wrapped up in my notes sometimes, I forget that I should be also showing them that I'm enjoying the speech. So I do have a little smiley face sometimes on my page to remind me to smile at the speaker, just in case I forget. But you do want to take notes, and I'm going to show you the method that I use. I find it to be most efficient for me to capture things without being nose down on the paper the entire time. Also pay attention to the audience and how they're responding to the speaker. Sometimes that will give you some fodder for giving useful feedback. And mostly put yourself in the shoes of the speaker and think about how they must be feeling giving the speech and how you would want to be treated if you were getting an evaluation on the speech that particular day. Now, during the evaluation, personalize the evaluation, but don't make it about you. If you're going to give examples, they should be examples that harken back to the speech rather than give you a chance to show off or brag. You always want to use I language. That's I saw, I heard, I felt when you're talking about someone else's speech. Always remember there are no experts in Toastmasters. There are no professors and no teachers. We're a self-teaching organization. You can only give your opinions, and the speaker will decide what to do with them. Now, if you use I language, that's really a benefit to yourself. The speaker can't argue with you because you're just saying what you think. They might not like your advice, they might not take it, but you can't be wrong if you're expressing your own feelings. So you can give personal stories or examples. I often say what works for me to calm my nerves is to make fists with my toes. That way nobody can see the tension. That's a little thing that works for me. They can take it or leave it. But as long as I'm expressing it in terms of myself, they can't argue. Be sure that you're evaluating the speech that you heard today. You're not evaluating the speaker, and you're not evaluating all of their past speeches. You can probably tell already I'm a pretty good speaker. And so I go into my club and give a speech, and people say, "Oh, Dennis, you're always so good." That doesn't help me. That's not going to make me grow. And the fact is, I'm not always that good. I'm not always prepared to the level that I need to be prepared. And I want to be called out if that's the case. I don't want to have somebody say, "Well, Dennis, you did in fact forget the second half of your speech, but normally you remember all of your speech. So I'm not going to pick on you for that today. You're so wonderful." No, I need to grow. And the only way I'm going to grow is if I continually get sincere, honest, helpful feedback. Always use the sandwich method. There's different opinions about this. Some people will give 3 positives and then they'll follow it with 3 negatives. That is a working combination. I've seen people win contests with that. I do prefer the sandwich method where you give a couple of things that were particularly good, some things that could be improved upon, and the last thing you do is say what you liked the very best about the speech. I find that that makes it easier to accept the criticism in the middle, and it also is more encouraging to bring people back and speak the next week. When you're giving the evaluation, always give specific examples of the points you're trying to make. I appreciated the way you defined the unfamiliar terms. I wasn't always aware of your vocal variety matching the emotion when you talked about your dog's illness. You want to avoid empty superlatives like, "That was amazing, it was fantastic, it was incredible." You sound like Chris Farley when he was interviewing Paul McCartney. Remember when you were with the Beatles? That was awesome. Yeah, no. You have to give specific examples so that people know why they're awesome, incredible, and fantastic. These are the things that you want to point out because those are what make a speech more resonant and more memorable for yourself and for the audience. These are the Toastmasters tropes that I loathe with the white hot intensity of 1,000 suns. The first one is, you drew us in. I wish that these words could be stricken from all Toastmasters meetings going forward. First of all, they don't mean anything. You drew us in. Secondly, you're speaking for the entire audience. We don't do that. You're only speaking for yourself. So don't tell anybody that you drew all of us in, because not everybody is going to agree with that assessment. If you're in a contest and you tell the judges that everyone was drawn in and the contest judge wasn't drawn in, you're going to lose that contest right off the bat. But you can say something that's very specific. I was intrigued. You piqued my interest with your quote. I was engrossed in your description of the path through the redwood trees. Something along that line achieves exactly the same sentiment, but now you're giving useful feedback. 3 words that should never be spoken. Use the stage. This is probably the most common Toastmasters trope. It's something Toastmasters say to Toastmasters if they don't know what else to say to other Toastmasters. No one has ever said to Steve Jobs, hey, I love that commencement speech, but man, you stood behind the podium the entire time. No. People should move if it enhances their speech. But I typically stay rooted in one place, unless there's a really good reason to move. When people move, it should be with a purpose. I would be more likely to criticize someone for moving theatrically without enhancing their speech than I would for having them stand in one place the entire time. And now in the world of Zoom, I often hear people, oh, you should stand up to speak. Well, the truth is we now live in a COVID era and we need to give COVID feedback. It's okay to comment on whether or not a speaker was effective, but you have to say why. Now, I'm giving this presentation sitting down because I don't want to stand for an hour and a half. I'm tired. I'm old. Now, I don't believe anyone is put off by the fact that I'm sitting down, nor should they be. Now, if the speech really should be delivered standing up, explain why you feel that way, but don't treat this like it's a hard and fast rule. When you're finishing up your evaluation, you want to summarize the key points that you had, repeat what was positive and what could be even better. Rather than ending with, I look forward to hearing your next speech or something along that line, all you have to say is, Madam Toastmaster, and hand the control back to the audience. It's a great idea to know what you're going to say at the end of the evaluation. Otherwise, you're going to slip back into this every single time. And again, it's an empty trope. Most important thing I want you to take away today is why we don't give whitewash evaluations in Toastmasters. As we say here, an honest evaluation is upbeat, encouraging, and it offers suggestions for improvement. Now, I've been working with a couple of members for whom English isn't their first language. They were preparing for humorous speech contests. Everybody had been giving them great, friendly, supportive feedback, and they really felt confident. And what they couldn't understand is why no one laughed at their jokes. The fact is they weren't landing because they had some language issues. The wording that they were using and the emphasis that they were placing on the words was making their jokes fall flat. No one wanted to confront them with the fact that they were having problems with their English and their pronunciation, because that seems like we're being racist or something along that line. But actually, they needed some help in order to fix those particular issues. And if you've built up a sense of trust and care with someone, you can give them that honest feedback that's going to help them grow. We have to remember that we're not preparing people to speak to 10 folks in the back of a Denny's. We're preparing members to give TED Talks. We're preparing people to give conference presentations in front of an audience of 3,000. So we don't want to just prop them up and make them feel good about themselves and make their egos feel good if they're not actually effective communicators. We want to build those skills so that when they go out into the real world, and that's what we're preparing for at Toastmasters, the real world, we want them to succeed. And for that, you have to give honest and helpful feedback. Don't just be a heart blesser the way they are in Texas. Oh, bless your heart. It's so cute that you give up to speak. I'd be so ashamed if I got up and I couldn't talk English right, but you do just fine. No, that's not going to help anybody. We give useful feedback and we don't fall back on the Toastmasters platitudes. Now, recently, I came upon this book, Radical Candor by Kim Scott. You know how sometimes you find a book and you read it and go, wow, I never thought of this stuff. It's amazing. That didn't happen with this book. I read this book and I said, oh my God, this is exactly what I've been doing in Toastmasters for the past decade. And finally, somebody put words to it so that I can share it with other people. The Candor Compass that Kim Scott has put together has got 4 arrows. So you've got on the horizontal continuum, being silent about things or challenging them directly. Up and down, it's utter apathy to caring deeply. Now, in truth, her book says instead of apathy, it's anger or expressing yourself in a hateful sort of way. But the opposite of love isn't hate. Those things are actually very close together. There's a thin line between them. The opposite of love is apathy, just not caring about someone. And if you don't care about people, you're not going to give them effective feedback. You can challenge them directly, but if you don't care about them, we call that obnoxious aggression. You went on and on. I was so bored by your speech. It was terrible. And your vocal variety, boy, you sound so monotone. I can't believe that you got up there and just grumbled all the way through your speech. That would be a very inappropriate evaluation at Toastmasters. However, at least you're giving useful feedback. If they are speaking in a monotone, it's not the best way to tell them so, but you're giving them something that they can use. And that's better than just being quiet about it. You'll see this where people won't give feedback in the evaluation, but they're happy to go to Post Toasties and tell you all about what was wrong with the speech that you all just heard in the meeting. That's a pretty underhanded thing to do and something that we wouldn't want to avoid. Not only does it show a lack of trust between the evaluator and the speaker, when you talk smack like that, everybody's going to assume that you talk the same smack about them when you're talking to other people. So if it's not something that you're willing to say to somebody to their face in a meeting, then of course you can give them very harsh feedback individually in a sweet and caring way off to the side. But if it's not something you would say to them in a meeting, it's not something you should say to other people outside of the meeting. Believe it or not, that's not the most hurtful thing that you can do in Toastmasters with your feedback. The worst thing you can do is what's called ruinous empathy. Caring is important, but we also have to challenge the speaker. Otherwise, we just tell people nice things that spare their feelings. And this is what was happening to the non-native speakers. You make them confident, full of self-esteem, and not very good. We have to have the courage to give them the feedback that helps them to grow. And that's where we get into radical candor, or the new term that Kim Scott actually uses in the revised edition, compassionate candor. At its core, it's guidance and feedback that's kind and clear. It's specific and sincere, honest and loving. If you appreciate something the speaker did, talk about it specifically and why you found it effective. A good evaluation doesn't have to be critical at all. It can be positive. You just have to take the time to use good examples rather than empty superlatives. When I read Radical Candor, I recognized compassionate candor right away because I'm already using it and have been for the past 10 years. Now that's club evaluations, but let's talk about contest evaluations and how they can be a little bit different. First, again, let's be clear, I'm no expert. Aren't any experts in Toastmasters. Contests are judged events, and the judges are not experts. The judges are other Toastmasters. A few years back, I recited my poem, The Barbarian's Beard, for District 4 Tall Tales contest. I nailed it. I stuck the landing. I thought I won. One of the other contestants came over and whispered to me, I want to talk to you now because when you win the trophy, you'll be busy talking to other people. I didn't win. I didn't even place. Now, last year, I recited exactly the same poem, took first place in District 101. Same speech, different judges, different day, different result. No way to predict what will happen. Now, what I can tell you is how I prepared and executed my evaluations when I took first and third place in District 57. You can use the same techniques or you can combine them with the ones you already have. But it all comes down to the judges. You can deliver the best evaluation of your life and lose because one of the judges ate a bad piece of fish that day. There's just no way to be sure. So don't take it personally if you lose the contest. Just like the speeches we give, the only person you're really in competition with is yourself. You want to be better than you were last week. You want to be a better contestant than you were last year. But this is how I do the evaluation contest. First of all, you do everything that you would do in a regular evaluation. You're not going to throw anything off to the side. When you deliver the evaluation, be sure that you're talking to the speaker in second person. Don't use third person voice talking about the speaker to the audience. That turns into what I would call third person invisible. You're talking about somebody as if they're not in the same room with you. They'll always speak directly to the person. And again, you'll be giving the same real feedback that you give normally. Now, what isn't the same is the fact that this is actually a speech. It has to have an introduction, a structured body, a summation, and a conclusion. It also needs flair. You want to use clever turns of phrase and eloquent elegance. You need to be engaging and entertaining without making it about you. And you have to be sure that you're hitting all of the points on the ballot. Now, here are the things that you're evaluated on when you give a speech in an evaluation contest. Top of the mark, of course, is your analytical quality. How well did you break down what the speaker did and describe it? Not quite as important are the recommendations that you give, but they should be specific and helpful in particular. Only 15 points are allocated to the technique, how well you do, but don't ignore that. Again, you want to deliver the speech with some elegance, with a little bit of flair, well spoken. Key to it, though, is that last box, the summation, 15 points. At the end of your evaluation in a contest, you must use the words in summation or in conclusion, as if you're holding two flashlights and you're guiding the judge into the hangar, right? Because they have to know, here comes the summation. And then you restate the points that you gave that were good, the points that could be even better in your evaluation. Let's say you gave a 100% perfect evaluation, but you forgot to say, here's my summation and summarize your main points. You've just taken an A+ and you've turned it into a B because you've lost 15 points. You're down to 85. So never skip the summation when you're doing an evaluation in the contest. Now, this is the form that I use when I'm taking notes. You only get one piece of paper to take your notes in the evaluation contest. That's all you're allowed to use. I flip it over. I immediately draw this grid. I have a column for the things that I thought were positive, a column for the things that I thought were negative. I draw an eyeball, an ear, and a heart. This is what I saw, this is what I heard, and this is what I felt. As the speaker is speaking, I use these boxes to jot down the specifics that I'm seeing and hearing so that I can put them together later and assemble them for the evaluation. But this is a great way to organize it in a very rough way before the speaker is even finished. Another thing to always keep in mind when you're going to be in a contest, be sure that you have a stiff folder or a magazine, something along that line that you can put behind the speaker's notes. Two reasons for that. One, you need something to write on very often because you're sitting in the audience and all you have is your knees otherwise. But the other thing, sometimes when I get nervous and I'm holding a piece of paper, it will jiggle and make a rattling noise. If I've got it on a stiff folder, it doesn't happen. My hands don't shake, and well, my hands may shake, but it doesn't make a noise. That's the important thing. How many pens should you have? Well, at least 2, but I would have 3, maybe 4. Carry 1 in your shoe and 1 in your back pocket. I would have enough pens that when one runs out, you're ready to move on to the next. Now, after the speaker is done, you've got 5 minutes to prepare. This is the order in which I prepare my notes. I just made the point that the summation is really important. So the first thing I do is summarize the things that I thought were done particularly well, 2 points of improvement, and the thing that I think the person did best. That way I'm giving 3 positives and 2 negatives. I prefer that balance there. Once I have my summarized points, I can move on to writing a beautiful conclusion. Now, this is where my evaluation is headed. So I know that no matter what, if I end up at that point, I've stuck the landing at that point. You write the conclusion so that you can immediately then write the introduction. And I encourage you to write them out completely. When you write the introduction now, you can make it fit with the conclusion, and you can bookend your evaluation to make it like a polished speech. Now at that point, and usually that takes me about 2 minutes, I spend the rest of the time writing down the specifics for the body in there. Approaching it in this way enables you to come up with a well-structured evaluation in a speech-like format without having the time that you would normally use to prepare normal speech. And the reason that I do the body last, if you've got the summation in there and you happen to run out of time and have to turn over your notes, you still have all of your points at that point. You just have to remember what it was that you specifically liked about that. That's easier to do than try to come up with an introduction or conclusion on the fly without writing it down. Okay. So again, it's 2 things you did well, and then I choose something they did well. For example, I really like the way you were framed in your Zoom window, and I'll use that to transition to a negative. Even though you were framed very well, I noticed that very often your hands were clasped as you were speaking, and if you were to relax them, it would help me to relax as a listener to your speech. So I've taken the positive, smoothly gone into something that's an area for improvement, give another area of improvement, and then transition back to what they did best. And if you can use that smooth transition all the way through, always remember, people remember your introduction, they remember your conclusion, and they remember your transitions, and they don't care what you said in between in a regular speech. And the same is true for the evaluation. If you give them that clear signposting, a little bit of finesse, and make some good points, you're going to win that contest. So at the finale, you summarize those points, reflect back to the opening statement, and for goodness sakes, try to start your summary when you see the yellow card. So many times I see somebody in a contest and they remember, oh, I had one more great thing that I wanted to tell you, and they start a new thought after the red card has appeared. And we call those people great losing evaluators, who give really wonderful feedback, great evaluations, and they go for 3 minutes and 32 seconds. There. Not too bad time-wise. Are there any immediate questions? And you can just unmute and shout out.
I had a question regarding the evaluations that you talked about, the contest. What is the reason that we cannot use the same method at our regular club meetings?
Oh, you certainly can use this at the regular club meeting. If you have the time, I always like to have a great conclusion and an introduction to my evaluations that I give in a club setting. If you plan to compete in the evaluation contest, I recommend you always do your evaluations in the club as if you were doing it for the contest, and try to give that form. I'm really just saying that I should be clear about this. I think that this is a great format that you can always use for giving evaluations. And the difference that I'm trying to strike here is that in order to win a contest, you have to be sure you've got all of these elements, as opposed to a normal club evaluation where you don't necessarily have to give it with the same level of finesse.
Thank you.
Good question. Thank
Dennis,
you. Yes, Mary.
what if the speaker that you're evaluating is so refined and it is so well done that you really struggle to find one, let alone two items to recommend for improvement? Do you just dig down and find some trivial thing, or what do you suggest?
I suggest that you spend the entire time talking about positive things, but give specific reasons that you're talking about their vocal variety. I really liked the foreign accents that you were using in that speech. I felt like I was sitting on the Riviera. Anything along that line, that's perfectly fine. It doesn't have to be critical to be a good evaluation.
Okay.
Just be sure that you're actually giving them good feedback on what they did well. I will tell you, it drives me crazy that the things that I pointed out, someone, what did he say just last week? Yeah, I think it was about standing up instead of being seated to give the speech. That's useless information, useless in the Zoom world. And it was just something that he said so that he would have something to say. All right.
Dennis, I'm sorry, I have a question. You mentioned at the beginning about the sandwich method. And if you're using the sandwich method, I know that that was in the first presentation. And then when you were talking about contests, you said to say something that the speaker did well, and then transition to something that they can do better. Now, if you're doing that, how is it possible to do the sandwich method?
Oh, I'm sorry, I was unclear about that. So it's, you do two things that they did particularly well.
Right.
So if I have, for example, something that has to do with what they said and something something visual, then I'll look to see, is my feedback about something they said or something I saw. And if my critical feedback, my area for improvement has to do with something visual, then I'll start with, you did this verbal thing very well. I really enjoyed the writing in your speech. I saw something I liked really well, but I saw something else that could be an improvement. I heard something else that wasn't quite clear to me, but what I liked best about it is the way I felt when you finished your speech. Okay, so I'm using the, as I'm going between the main points, I'm trying to find a flow where they will lead back into one another instead of just saying, you did this well, you did this well, you did this poorly, you did this poorly. This would be fantastic. Bye now. So that's a sandwich, but it doesn't have that same flow and finesse in between. Hopefully I'll be able to demonstrate this in a few minutes.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
I like to go out on a limb. It's fun because Toastmasters are never going to leave you hanging out here. So as I evaluate the speeches, we'll see if I'm actually able to practice what I preach.
Okay, Dennis, I have one question, particularly for the Zoom. My name is Thomas Gray. How are you evaluating a person with eye contact since they're sitting down and they're looking at the screen, contacts and moving around? How does that play into we evaluate that particular part, or do we?
Let me ask this. How was my eye contact while I was doing the presentation? Did you feel it was okay?
Yeah, you can't look any other way.
That's right. One of the tricks in Zoom, I was using notes the entire time. You may have heard me stumble once or twice as I was reading what I was trying to say, but I have my notes right under the camera, right there, so that I'm continually scrolling it up. It helps that I have the glasses and you can't see my eyes going left to right. So the feedback I give to people in Zoom is put your notes someplace where it won't be quite so obvious that you're referring to notes. Now, when you're doing a half-hour presentation, it's perfectly okay to use notes. And I'm not going to shy away from that. Giving a 5 to 7 minute speech, people should still be working on their memorization skills. And they can have notes, but they should just be the prompts and the reminders rather than the fully written speech in front of them. I will say that I've done fully written speeches, 5 to 7 minutes, with the script right underneath the camera, and I did not receive any feedback about it was obvious that I was reading. There. Yes, so it doesn't matter if someone is reading in Zoom if you can't tell, but if it's very obvious that they are doing it, that's an area for improvement.
Since you mentioned that about your glasses and reading, I also wear glasses, and many times when we're looking, there's a glare of some sort. Yeah, I can see I'm not sure what it is I'm seeing in your eyes, but there is, like, I don't want to say feedback, but it's there and it's very noticeable. Is that something that you would evaluate too? Because the speaker has two options, either have their glasses on or can't see you.
Yes, I will say now, oh my, okay. When I am a contestant in a contest, I take my glasses off. Now, that's because I've rehearsed my speech and I know exactly what I'm going to say. I don't have to read anything at all. And I do want people to see my deep brown eyes. Some would say hazel with the tinges of green that I have in there. And I want them to look soulfully into them. But generally, if the glasses were to interfere with their ability to communicate effectively, then you can mention it in the evaluation.
I do have a question, Dennis.
Yeah.
My name is Nikum. What about the virtual background we use this as a background, or it's better to have a real background?
If you're a contestant, I recommend using a real background. I actually have a green curtain that I can pull when I'm worried about it. I'm not worried about it today. It works pretty well. I do have a virtual background. I don't actually have a Toastmasters International wall. I should, but I don't in my home. So virtual background is okay for a presentation like this, but if I were in the contest, I would not want my hand to disappear, as you just saw. So I pull the green screen and I use a green background.
Thank you.
I have a question. You spoke about folk trying to work on memorization. Do you think when evaluating someone, it's okay to say use less PowerPoint presentation? I've noticed that a lot of members beginning to use a lot of PowerPoints to do presentation.
Yes. We have something in the technical industry that we call death by PowerPoint. This is generally when someone will put up their PowerPoint slides, there's a huge amount of text on the slide, and then they sit there and read it to you. The very important thing I tell you next, yeah, and they just drone through the slides. Now, that's horrible. That's one of the worst things that has come out of the technological era. So I don't know what you thought of my slides. You may notice that they were not terribly cluttered with text. Whenever possible, I just use a picture and then I'll talk over it. The one thing that you want to avoid, you don't want people to read ahead of you. So they're spending all of their time reading what you're going to say in the next minute. And you don't want people to be able to, you don't want to bore the audience by reading to them what they can read for themselves, right? So just your key points on the PowerPoint. Wherever possible, use pictures. And for excellent examples of this, you can watch TED Talks on YouTube, and you'll see that most TED Talk presentations will have a maximum, I think the average is 14 words in the entire 20-minute PowerPoint presentation that they do, just the key words that they really want to punch.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Dennis, I have a question. Could you give us an example of a good and bad introduction and conclusion to an evaluation?
I will probably do that later in the day because I'll give a couple of introductions and one's bound to be better than the other. But
okay, do you have any, sorry, do you have any,
go ahead.
Sorry, do you have any tips on what to be careful about to make, to do, come up with a good introduction? What are your thought process? What do you think you need to hit to make it a good introduction and a good conclusion?
Well, sincerity is always important. And if you can fake sincerity, you've got it made. But no, as you're listening to the speech, you do want to listen for something that resonates with you. You want to catch something that you can relate to personally, a story from your life or something that you have recognized in your own professional career, something that is a hook for you. Well, you grab that hook and again, you put that into your conclusion that one day I hope to be as mature as you are. And then at the beginning, when you look at me, you see an old guy, and some people compare age with maturity. Well, your speech definitely put that illusion to rest. And then you move forward. So I'm not responding directly to the speech. I grabbed something from the speech, applied it to myself. I've already got it in my conclusion. So when I get to the end, I'm going to sound really clever. Oh, look at the way he came back and he said that he's immature at the end. And it's impressive to the audience and it's impressive to the judges. Yes.
Thank you.
You want to be engaging, you want to be entertaining, but you have to be sure you don't make it all about you. And one thing, there was one point that I must have skipped over. I don't believe I said don't summarize the speech, or maybe it was on a slide. I just loathe it when somebody gets up there. You gave such an amazing speech. First, you talked about when you were a little boy. Then you moved on to talk about when you were in high school. And at the end, you talked about when you were in college. What a great speech. Thank you for the summary. Yes, that's the speech we just heard. Do you have any feedback on the speech? That would be helpful. Yes.
Got it. Thank you very much, Dennis.
All right, now I'll try to reserve some time at the end, but I think we do need to move on to actual examples. And we're going until 4:30 Eastern time, right? So we've got another good amount of time. Excellent. So I will look for Terry to introduce our first test speaker, and I'll go through my notes of how I would evaluate that first test speaker.
I will hand this over to Tom, our farm master of the day.
Go.
Okay. Thank you, Terry, and thank you,
Can I
Dennis.
ask a question? Is this the speech we're evaluating?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And I would recommend to all of you, I've got my paper here. Let's see if I can, no, I probably can't. There. You can barely see. Yeah, I've got my pluses, my minuses, what I saw, what I heard, and what I felt page. So I recommend to all of you, if you would, take out a piece of paper, a plus column, a minus column, saw, heard, and felt, and you can play along. See if you catch the same things I catch.
Okay. And I just have one question to our model speaker. Tracy, do you want people to mute or turn their video off, or do you want us to leave it on?
I actually would prefer if you would leave it on. I've already done my contest for the year and I came in second, so it no longer matters if I get used to this. It was distracting to me for some reason.
Okay. And if you can't see the timer, I would ask our timer to send Tracy a note at 5 minutes, 6 minutes, and 7 minutes. And
I just pinned it, so I should be okay.
okay. All right. Okay. At this time, I'm going to introduce our model speaker, Tracy. So many stories. So many stories. Tracy.
Have you ever found that you needed to come up with a speech and you only had 24 hours because you procrastinated so long? Fellow Toastmasters, honored guests, that's exactly the position I found myself in yesterday. After giving a contest at the area level and then knowing I was giving a model speech today, I had sort of thought about a few things I could talk about, but I really hadn't nailed anything down. There are so many stories after 10 years of giving speeches. Could I use an old speech? I could, but that just seemed like cheating. I just couldn't make myself do it. And well, could I use the speech I'd given for the area contest? Yes, I could. I have that speech completely memorized. But I didn't want to torture my club. They've heard it a few times. So today, I had to come up with a brand new story. And I thought about the stories and I said, what about my passion for genealogy? I've never talked about that at this club. I love genealogy. That's where the stories are. They're on my family tree. I just have to pull them out and find them. So I've got 1,700 people I could pick from off of my family tree. And I could probably come up with a story for almost all of them. Some would be really short maybe, and some would be a little bit more interesting. So I decided to give you 4 stories, or 4 mini stories, about people who happen to be related to me. We're going to go back in time. The first person's name is Darling Dawson. Darling Dawson was born in Ireland. He's born in the year 1740. He's only really famous for having been a British soldier in the Revolutionary War. He was a captain of a ship. His ship got hit. His ship got boarded. He was given 2 choices. We can shoot you now, or you can join our side. Well, guess what? I'm here, and that means he became an American. Very, very quickly, he joined the other side. He worked on his ship still, flying a British flag, knowing that he was really working for the Americans, going back and forth and taking supplies from British ships and bringing them to the US. He married a woman in Ohio. He had 13 children, and one of those children I am directly descended from. So I am a daughter of the American Revolution. Well, that's kind of an interesting one. And then I have a villain in my story, Jonathan Nathan Cripe. He's on my father's side. He was born in 1840. Why is he famous? because he shot his wife's lover. Yes, he found them together and he shot her, or her boyfriend. And he was about to shoot her. And she begged him and said, no, 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 he was attacking me, he was attacking me. And for whatever reason, whether he believed her or not, he didn't shoot his wife. He went to jail for about a year. And the governor, knowing that this man had been of good stature and had terrible circumstances, commuted his sentence from life to time served, and he was released from prison. I'm not sure how my great six times great grandmother felt about her husband coming back, but they lived together for the next 20 years until his death. And then I'm going to go even further back in time. We're going to go to the year 1515. And we're going to go to a woman named Marion Ogilvy. Marion Ogilvy is a lady. She's English. She's not married, but she has 8 children with one man. His name is David Beaton. He is the Archbishop and later the Cardinal of her section in England. They have such a bond and are so positive together that they use not one, but 2 coats of arms. They use the Ogilvy coat of arms and the Beaton coat of arms in their family crest to create one crest, because though they never married, they were together 20 years, raised 8 children, and until his death, which happened again by murder in front of her, they were a happy couple by all means. And the last person I'd like to tell you about, this is really far back. 1316 is the year of his birth. His name is Robert Stewart II. He is actually one of 3 Stewart kings of Scotland. And they are my 24th, 25th, and 26th great grandfathers. Yes, I am descended from 3 British kings, and my family tartan is Royal Stewart plaid. We found this out, and I have McDonald's in my family, and my McDonald family was really upset that I was more Scottish than they were. Just goes to show you that if you look at your family tree, you can have a lot of great family stories and a few great family feuds. Toastmasters.
Tracy, thank you very much. Very interesting stories. And at this point, Dennis, I'd like to ask you, do you want to do an evaluation of Tracy to allow our first evaluator, who is Bernie Cohen, an opportunity to put his notes together, or do we want to go straight into the evaluations from the evaluators?
Well, my understanding was that I would, are we going to have 3 speeches?
No, what you're going to have is evaluators, and the intent was, you can do the evaluation of the speaker as an overall, so we can see your presentation in action, and then after that we had evaluators that were going to do evaluations, and you were going to evaluate them. That was my understanding.
Oh, well, my understanding was that we would have 3 speakers, and that is not the case. I need to know that now.
Okay.
No, we will only have 1 model speaker today, and the 4 or 5 evaluators will evaluate Tracy, and then you will evaluate them and give Tracy your feedback.
That being the case, what we can do, I want to give Bernie some time, if he's our first evaluator, to work on his notes. You can go ahead, Bernie.
I'm ready.
You're ready to go, are you?
I'm ready.
All right. Well,
okay. If he's ready, I'll go ahead and ask you, Bernie, if you would please pin Marianne Singlaub. She is our timer.
I see her.
Okay. And at this time, I want to introduce Bernie Cohen. Bernie Cohen.
Thank you, Mr. Toastmaster. Tracy, this is a very intriguing speech. I enjoyed it thoroughly because it's about your family, and I'm also impressed and also envious because I can't trace my family back maybe more than three generations. And to be a descendant from royalty is another thing. You know, I mean, my family were peasants in Belarus. I found that there are four stories, and that you connected the stories in a way that gave it a continuity, although they were all from different generations. And of course, the continuity was that they were all related to you. It was interesting that your whole family comes from from royalty. But there are a couple of things I'd like to point out to you that maybe you could make this even better. First of all, you were wearing headphones, and I know this is Zoom and it's different than doing it live, but I feel that a person should take off the headphones, especially the type you're using, which are pretty bulky, and because it is a bit distracting. But that's minor. It didn't interfere with the overall quality of the speech. You mentioned something like a cardinal of section, one of your ancestors, and you not explain what a section was or where it was or what it was a particular church, and it left me a little bit confusing. And when you confuse somebody in a speech, they're thinking about what they're confused about rather than paying attention to you going forward. The other things I liked is your specific gestures. And when you were specific, they were wonderful gestures, but otherwise your hands were moving up and down. And I felt it was a bit distracting. Overall, I think that the speech not only had charm, but it had historical interest, and that it's something like that draws an audience in, and I was certainly drawn into your speech. And I kind of envy you because I don't have that background to talk about. Mr. Toastmaster.
Okay, thank you, Bernie. And now we'll go to Dennis for his feedback on Bernie's speech or Bernie's evaluation.
You're on mute, Dennis.
It makes it hard for you to hear me when I'm on mute.
Right.
There we are. Bernie, I appreciate your evaluation that you did it so quickly after the speech. That was well done. Now, normally, of course, in most Toastmasters clubs, you have the speeches, you have the table topics, then you do the evaluations, and that way the table topics time can be used by the evaluators to prepare a nice, well-crafted evaluation. Some clubs don't do it that way. I recommend everybody try it. The way the Toastmasters organization has evolved over the years, the past nearly 100 years, there's a reason that they have the suggested order the way they do. So kudos to you for pulling it out so quickly. I like the way that you started your evaluation by connecting with the story and applying a little bit of your own story. You almost pushed it to the edge as you were talking a little, gave me a little too much detail about your own family before you got into the meat of your evaluation, but that's a minor point at that point. Speaking of minor points, you did criticize Tracy for her use of headphones. And you said, well, that's a minor thing and it didn't distract. If it's a minor thing and it didn't distract, that's not something you want to bring up in the evaluation. You only want to bring something up that is going to be very effective for helping them. You talked about the fact that you appreciated her specific gestures, but sometimes you found them to be hidden. At that point, you were kind of bouncing back and forth between the positives and negatives. Some people like to do it that way. If you're going to do that then I would structure your entire evaluation as here's a positive, here's an area for improvement, another positive, another area for improvement, and actually follow that format all the way through. That way it doesn't seem to be scattered as it was. But the very best point that you made, I thought, was when you described how she talked about section and how it left you feeling confused. That's exactly what we want to hear. Not you were confusing, but I was confused by the way you talked about that at that particular time. And the only thing I'm going to ding you for severely is you use the phrase "you drew us in," and Bernie, no, please. You use that because you didn't have the time to prepare a great conclusion as you would in a club meeting. And so I'm going to forgive you, but I'm going to ding you for that because, of course, we want to eradicate those words from the Toastmasters organization. Amen.
Can I just make a comment about the part about the headphones? I misspoke. I didn't mean to say they weren't distracting. By the way, and I should have taken your advice and taken a few minutes to prepare better because I forgot really to include the conclusion that I thought about.
Right, and that's perfectly fine for what we're doing here today. What you just did is save me from what I would have done if I were you, because mine would have been very similar to what you have just done. So kudos to you for jumping in.
Okay, thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Bernie. Our second evaluator is Marshall Carter. Marshall Carter.
Good afternoon, Human Forum. And Tracy, I want to thank you for your speech today. You took us on an interesting journey, and I was glad I was there to just be there to go along on the ride. You captivated me when you talked about how you had to put together your speech in 24 hours. And any Toastmaster who's ever had in that position or been in a club where they weren't able to give, no one had to get the speech to give, you were able to present something very quickly. I want to commend you and thank you for that. Your speech, I enjoyed several things about your speech. One thing that I did enjoy was your use of vocal variety. Your vocal variety was, you were high, you were low, and you were passionate. Some moves were quick, some words were slow, and you kept me engaged into your speech. Also, things that I liked about your speech is that you had positives, negatives, and also just kind of like just little bits of trivia. It's something that no one would ever know by just looking at you. So you told us about your history of your family, and you told us such things that has kept us, this is an interesting person. Point of improvement, there were certain parts of your speech where the letters were very repetitive, or you had one ancestor, the last name was Dawson, and in a few statements, you repeated the first name, last name, and you both began with D. So it began to be very repetitive. And also in other instances, you would use he, and not use the person's name. I would like to feel more connected with the people that are in the story so I can be able to tell each character apart. Last, I want to close. And again, I commend you for giving a speech you were able to put together within 24 hours. I thought that was very impressive, and I really liked the presentation that you gave. To conclude, I would like to say that you had good vocal variety. I like the way that you told the stories, and also that I like the fact that you were able to put this together, the speech, in 24 hours. I was impressed by that, and I did enjoy your speech, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Marshall. And now over to Dennis.
Wow.
Nicely done, Marshall. I like that you started with the discussion of an interesting journey that we were taking along. Would have been nice to circle back to that in the conclusion, because that would have been a nice way to bookend the speech. I agree with you that vocal variety is one of Tracy's strengths. I would have appreciated if you had given a couple of specific examples of phrases that she used. Something that you caught that I had not paid attention to was her use of pronouns and proper names. I thought that was an excellent point. If you found it confusing as she was going through there, and interesting that you would point out that it was repetitive. If I, as an audience member, I'm feeling confused, generally it's because they're not using the proper name often enough. And so giving her feedback that the writing could be tightened up to be certain that we're using the pronouns and the proper nouns in a good balance is feedback that anybody could learn well from. Jumping over to your particular presentation, if you look at your Zoom window right now, you are cut off at the neck. And this is something we always want to avoid. We want to be sure that we're not cutting off at any joint as we do. So be sure you're not cut off at the neck. Be sure that you're not cut off at the waist. Be sure you're not cut off at the knees, however you're standing. Something that I would apply to Tracy as well as you, and possibly it's because of the headphones, your heads are actually, at this point, you're too close to the top at this point, and so you look uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable for the audience as they're watching you. So leaving just a little bit of headspace, and I'm moved back because I was taking notes. There we go. Just a little headspace here makes the audience more comfortable as they're watching you because they're not worried about you bumping your head quite so often. Darn, I wanted to circle back to another great thing that you did, but I'm afraid I buried it in the midst of my little presentation here. I noticed that you talked about the fact that she wrote the speech in 24 hours, and you brought this in several times during the evaluation. I would have preferred that you say it once, or if you were going to work with it twice, work it into your introduction and into your conclusion. I think that would have been a great hook, since it obviously had an impact on you for that evaluation. Great insights, great job.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, Marshall. Our next evaluator is John Bowen. John Bowen.
Families, we all have them, and yet somehow we all find sometimes a struggle to incorporate them into our regular life. One of the things that I appreciate about what Tracy did here is that she took something that is a problem often for us as Toastmasters, finding that speech topic. And she pulled in something that we're all surrounded with, families, and found a way to use something that I would never have thought of using. It was an effective way to solve a problem that we often have. I appreciate that Tracy did a fairly good job of staying centered in her Zoom speech area. The Zoom area is smaller than we're used to, and it's very easy to get into the mode of making gestures out here to the side where you really can't see them. She mostly kept her gestures down in the Zoom window. The one thing I would suggest to her on the gestures, though, is that often her gestures involve a vertical hand movement like this. Sometimes she would say on this hand and on this hand and contrast things effectively that way, but the vertical hand movement was there a great deal. I'm going to make another suggestion to Tracy. I'm going to suggest that she try to work on how to involve her whole audience in her speech. She started out well by bringing in a you statement there at the beginning, your ancestors and the problem with procrastinating about writing the speech. And at the end, she had a you statement, bringing it back to how we could use our family. But I would challenge her to use those you statements all the way through. She could ask us, after telling about the murder in her family, do you have a villain in your family? When there's royalty in her family, she could ask us, is there royalty back in your family? Do you see a way that you could use that to tell your story more effectively? To me, it's a danger for me when someone tells me a story that is not so closely connected to exactly what I'm doing. And it's a way to make me see more effectively how what Tracy's doing could relate to what I could do in the very same situation. I like to see that very strong you connection there. I also like to see, most importantly, the way that Tracy was connected to her own family. Often we ignore those ancestry things. And I loved seeing how strongly she felt, coming from the heart, that her family was fun and interesting. Maybe some royalty, maybe some villains, maybe going back a long, long ways. But it was heartwarming to me to see that it was heartwarming to her to talk about those people that were somewhat removed from where we are today. So in summary here, I would like to commend Tracy for talking about something that's valuable to Toastmasters. How do you avoid procrastination? How do you find a topic? Maybe it's right around you. I appreciate she stayed on the screen. I think she could vary the hand gestures and really watch that vertical gesture. I think she could find a way to bring the yous in more effectively throughout this speech and keep reminding her audience that they're talking to us. Families, we all have them. We're all interesting. They're all interesting. We just don't all have speeches about them. And I'm thinking maybe there's some for that in my family tree for me in the future too. Thank you, Tracy. Mr. Farm Master.
Thank you, John. Back to you, Dennis.
Nicely done. Now, Bernie, as you were saying, you can see that with a little extra time, John was able to craft that introduction and conclusion. And well done there. I have a couple of things here. I thought there you are. Hi, John. I thought you were very nicely framed within your Zoom window, and your gestures worked rather effectively. I want to point out for people who are in contests, and this is nothing about this, we're just having a happy little meeting here. The background that John has is real, but it's very busy, and it's at times more interesting than looking at him. So if you're in a contest, you want to avoid having a nice knick-knack shelf or anything like that behind you. I'm looking at Abe Katz, who's got a great glass block window behind him. That's a great background for the contest, something along that line. Or a very neutral background. I can see Wickham has a picture, but not something that would be distracting there. That's just something to keep in mind. You spoke in third person, and you did so, I believe, all the way through. It's possible you addressed Tracy at the beginning as you, but I think that you were consistent, which is fine. If you choose to speak in third person, at least be certain that you use it the entire evaluation. However, you were giving her feedback on her non-use of you, the second person, in there. And I found that to be an interesting contrast. I strongly recommend that you talk to the individual and let the rest of us listen in, as opposed to talking about the speaker, because it makes it more likely that you're going to give more empathetic feedback. I also really recommend that you try not to rewrite the person's speech. You can throw in some suggestions or ideas, but be careful not to give them feedback that would say, I would have done it differently at that point, because it's their speech. They get to choose what they particularly want to talk about. But while I did enjoy your talking about families at the beginning and families at the end, I was missing a smooth transition from the points that you were making back into how families are an integral part of the stories that we tell in Toastmasters, something along that line, so that it didn't feel quite so tacked on at the start and the finish, but rather was there in a more organic way. And that's just something to think about, how you can make it flow from the suggestion that you were giving into the summary, and from the summary into that one or two last concluding sentences. Great. But as you can tell, everyone, the feedback that I'm providing to John is at a more nuanced detail than I would give to just any evaluator out here, because that was a very skillful evaluation in general. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, John. Our next evaluator is Dorothy Jenkins. Dorothy Jenkins.
Tracy, thank you for your speech titled So Many Stories. The first thing I'd like to say is thank you for sharing. Some things that I really enjoyed that you did is that you told us what you were going to do, and you did just that. You told us that you were going to tell us about 4 relatives, 4 different stories, and each person was more fascinating as you told your story. And the reason that I felt that's what I heard is because of your vocal variety. There were times that you looked side to side as if you were sharing a secret with us about each of your relatives. I kind of chuckled when you mentioned the relative that had 8 children by one man. However, she was never married to him. Oh my goodness, what a scandal during that time. Now, going back to the vocal variety, each time you leaned in as if telling us a secret. This person was famous because of this, or that person was famous because of that. Thank you for doing that. Now, when you were sharing your stories, I kind of got lost, just a little confused in the order, because you told us about a relative, Darla, that was born in 1740. Then you talked about a relative born in 1515 and another in 1360. I'm sorry I missed the 4th relative. I was confused about the order. I would have wanted to hear this relative was born in 1360 and tell his story, which was Robert Stewart, and then keep them in that sequential order. I didn't know if there was something relevant about sharing the order out of order. And you mentioned a boyfriend, and then you mentioned the person as a lover. A boyfriend and a lover are 2 different things. So if that person is going to be the lover, then talk about the lover throughout and not switch back to boyfriend. In conclusion, I loved your stories. We all have families. I wrote down a couple of quotes while I was listening to your speech because I would have wanted a stronger closing and a takeaway. Right now with COVID going on, we've got Zoom, we've got cell phones, emails, Twitter, all of these different social media methods to reach out to our families. This would be an excellent way to connect with your family without actually being there in person. A quote that I wrote down, and I think it's kind of funny, I don't know if this might be a quote that might have enhanced your speech, is when you confuse the dead, you irritate the living. However, I didn't feel irritated today. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.
Thank you, Dorothy. And over to you, Dennis.
All right. Nicely done, Dorothy. Trying to look for where I want to start here. I thought you had some excellent points. Talking about the difference between a boyfriend and a lover, that is a very specific detail that you pulled out, and certainly an area for improvement that did add to the difficulty I had in understanding that particular portion of the story. So that was very astute. You talked about vocal variety, then you talked about something being a scandal, then you said going back to vocal variety. And that is interesting to me because one of the things that I really encourage you to do is have a smooth flow. So if you're going to talk about vocal variety, talk about everything having to do with vocal variety. And if there's a negative that you want or an area for improvement, then you can segue into that from there. You talked about it, but I didn't hear you give any concrete examples of what were great examples of vocal variety in the speech. So that was kind of a lost point for me. You talked about the need for a takeaway at the end. Careful, that could also be another Toastmasters trope. People always fall back on that. It's important that we do have a takeaway, but you're not necessarily going to have that when you've got someone telling personal family stories. It's not like they're necessarily going to all congeal into one point, the way you would expect it to happen for a international speech contest, something along that line. So just be careful that you're not misapplying a trope at that point. The order of the speech was reverse chronological order, and I actually found it interesting that she was going back in history instead of going forward. And I would pull that out as a positive, not just immediately going to the oldest toward the newest. So it's interesting that you pointed that out. But what was really great about this evaluation that I just loved is I'm personally always looking for signposting in a speech. That's where you tell us where you're going to go at the beginning of the speech so that we can follow the organization. And you gave us some great signposting in your evaluation at the beginning when you were talking about the signposting that you were looking for out of Tracy's speech so that you could follow that more easily. So not only did you pull out something that was a great area for improvement in Tracy's speech, you demonstrated it in your evaluation, and that is masterful.
Thank you, Dennis, and thank you, Dorothy. And y'all can see by the time that our time is running out, but wait, there's more. We have one more evaluator, Stephen Rogers. Stephen Rogers.
Actually, I was told I was not evaluating today because time was running out, so I did not prepare an evaluation. So if you thought it was impressive that she got a speech done in 24 hours, I did not get an evaluation done in 1 minute.
Okay, that's Stephen. You're off the hook. At this time, I want to send it back over to Dennis for. We'll do a few minutes of quick Q&A. And Dennis, if I may, as the Toastmaster today, I have a question for you. I always chide people when I do evaluations if they don't record themselves. Do you record your speeches, and do you recommend that speakers record their speeches?
Oh, I will tell you this. I have won the humorous, I've won the Tall Tales contests. I haven't won the ISC because I just don't have a story yet that would propel me to that level. I'm still working on it. I did a ISC speech last year. For the month preceding the area contest, I record my speech on a CD and I put it in my car and I listen to it every time I get in the car, driving to work, driving home, driving to the store. I put it onto my iPod. Yes, it's a musical device for you young people that you used before you had a telephone. I record my speech and I go for a daily walk of 1 to 1.5 hours. I listen to my speech again and again throughout the time. I will turn off the recording, practice aloud because it's a isolated place where I do my walking. And when I get tired of saying it aloud, I will listen to it again on the recording. One of the nice things about Zoom is that you can start a meeting all by yourself. You don't have to have a Zoom account. It's free. Record your meeting and not only listen to yourself, but you can see yourself delivering the speech and see how effective it is. Do I recommend recording? Absolutely. That is absolutely imperative to preparing. And you'll notice I said that I record it and listen to it for the month before the area contest. People often go into the area contest thinking, yeah, I was good enough to win the club, so I'll work on it a little bit and I'll be good enough for area. That they work on it a little more, I'll be good enough for division. But the people who win the international speech contest go into their club contest with a speech that's ready to win the international. So if you want to win the International Speech Contest, that speech has got to be ready to win at the club level. Don't wait until you have advanced before you start working seriously on it.
Right. And Dennis, I should have asked you earlier, is it okay if we extend the meeting for 10 minutes? Are we?
It's okay with me. I apologize to the group for not
And
finishing on time.
to speed the Q&A, I think it would be helpful if people texted you the questions. That way you could look at the questions and prioritize what you think is worth answering. Or if somebody has something very special they want to go break in, please.
Feel free to shout out. Yeah.
Yep.
Yes.
Hello.
What would be your introduction and conclusion to the speech we just heard?
My introduction and conclusion, I immediately noted that the title was So Many Stories, and I would say something along the line, stories are what make our Toastmasters speeches memorable, and they're the way that we make connections. So I would say something about that at the beginning and at the end. And if I had more time to massage it, I would come up with something pithy about that. But I seized on the title immediately, and I knew that I would have used that as my hook.
Hey.
Hi, this is Kate. I have a quick question, a specific one. Dennis, in Dorothy's evaluation, you mentioned something she did well. You said sign postage or poster. I couldn't get that, but what is that, please? Thank you.
Yeah, signposting is the way that you lay out what the speech is going to be about at the very beginning. You want to have a thesis statement, ideally. I'm going to tell you about 3 things you can do to be sure that your home is prepared for an emergency. You want to have a safety kit, you want to have an escape route, and you have to know where the dog is, whatever the ideas are. But you start at the beginning and tell us where you're going to go. You don't have to be that explicit every single time, but what you want to avoid is getting 2 minutes, 2.5, 3 minutes into your speech before you actually state what you're going to be talking about today. The signposting is good for old people like me. Hey, what you talking here? Because I don't always follow so easily. And ideally, you'll not just have the 3 points at the beginning, but you'll have transitions in between the points. As you say, well, we talked about the importance of an escape kit, but where are you going to take it? Well, you're going to take that escape kit on your escape route. And now you've flowed into it. You've repeated your main point. You've moved into the next point in a smooth way that enables me to follow you throughout the 5 to 7 minute speech. If you're not following that pattern, then I'm not able necessarily to understand where you're going. Now, something that would have helped in Tracy's speech, if she said, I'm going to take you back in time and we'll go back 1 step at a time through my family tree. And then we would have been prepared for the reverse chronological order.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up question, what did Dorothy did? What did she do? Can you give me that specific example Dorothy did well with the sign posting?
Her signposting, she was pointing out, I didn't write down a specific example for that, I'm afraid. She was pointing out what the structure of her evaluation was going to be, as she was talking about the structure of Tracy's speech being in reverse chronological order. I thought that that was rather well done.
Okay, it's quieted down, so I think we'll take this opportunity to go ahead. And,
What, we have 2 more questions in this chat.
oh, sorry.
From Debbie King.
Debbie King. Why am I trying to eradicate you drew me in? Because it's just used too often. Find another way of saying you drew me in. I was intrigued by specific things in your speech. I was very moved by something that you said. I felt that I could relate to this because of something that's happened in my life. But just to say you drew me in is vapid. It doesn't mean anything without a specific example. If you have a specific example, you don't have to fall back on the Toastmasters trope. You can just talk about the specific example.
Okay. Terry, you said there was one other question.
I think that was my question. What I was asking Dennis is, how long did it take you to reach this level where you not only evaluate speakers, but evaluate your evaluators the way that you did today? When did you know that you had reached that pivotal point, and what's your next step?
Oh, how did you know that you were ready to win a speech contest?
I really didn't. I just jump out there and try.
You just jumped out there and tried. I've been doing evaluations for a long time. Evaluations are important to me. What actually happened is I was doing the Evaluate to Motivate presentation that comes with the Toastmasters Successful Club series. I've done that a few times. And someone asked me, well, you do this so well, why don't you have a workshop around it? And I said, well, okay, I can give that a try. And I started doing workshops, and this is probably the 10th evaluation workshop I've given this year. Every time I give it, I learn from the people to whom I give the evaluation workshop and steal all your good ideas. Then I go on to the next evaluation workshop. I pretend all of those ideas were my own and continue to gain notoriety through stealing. And that's how it's done.
Okay.
As you just said, you jump in and do it when you're given the opportunity.
Thank you, Dennis. And I have one final question. What district are you from and where's it located?
I'm in District 57. It's the East Bay of up to Northern California. So we're talking about Oakland to Fremont, out to the city of Tracy, and then all the way up to the Oregon border.
That's a big district. Okay, at this point, I'm going to turn it over for concluding remarks from our one and only Abe Katz. Now, Abe does have a special today. If you like his background, he will sell it to you for $97. But if you act quickly, he'll give it to you for free. So if you send us an email, we'll get you that background. Abe, take it away.
Thank you so much, Tom. Nothing is for free, by the way, Tom, just to point that out. Thank you, Toastmasters. Thank you, Dennis. Dennis started off by telling us that evaluation is the heart of Toastmasters. Evaluation, both giving it and getting evaluated, is how we grow and get better and better. And I feel that this evaluation workshop today was invaluable to me, and I hope it's been invaluable to you. Now, there's people I'd like to thank. First of all, Tracy, who's a member of Humor Farm. That was an exceptional, there's a superlative speech. And the fact that you put it together in 24 hours was great. If you had 25 hours, who knows where you could have been. Thank you for Evaluator Bernie Cohen from Get Up to Speak Toastmasters, District 27. Marshall Carter, Master Evaluators Toastmasters, District 56. John Bowen, Blue Ridge Toastmasters, District 37, that's in Asheville, North Carolina. And Dorothy Jenkins, Master Evaluators and Voices of Moses, Toastmasters, District 56. And now I'd especially like to thank Dennis. Dennis, you were magnificent. You drew me in The only thing I would think you could do better was using the stage more efficiently. And I look forward to hearing you again. I learned that I should not say any of those things. One important thing for me was I learned that I should wear my glasses. Never thought of it. Great idea. I want to thank you for your clear and organized presentation. And I want to thank you for the fact that you will be sharing your slides and allow yourself to be video so that honestly, I do look forward to seeing you again and again and reviewing the information you shared with us today. I really, really enjoyed it, and it's been invaluable to me. So thank you so much for being here today. And I hope I'm speaking for everyone who watched. It's been an exceptional presentation. Now, this workshop has been brought to you by Uniform Toastmasters. Now, we're a Toastmasters club, but we're a little different. Instead of table topics, what we do is we do improv. Now, table topics is extemporaneous speaking, but you do it alone. With improv, you do it with another person or everyone in the club. We do it by playing games. We do it with charades. We do it with words, whatever we can to think quickly on your feet. And we have a great time. We banter, we laugh. And so I am inviting all of you, every 79 people of you who are on this workshop today, to come and join us and visit us at our next meeting. We have the room. And I think that's next Sunday, or are we going to be off for Easter holiday? Well, right now we're going to be on for next Sunday. That's April 7th. The link about our...
It's April 4th.
April 4th.
April 4th, I'm sorry, April 4th. Our
A little early April Fool's joke.
And the link for our club is on the agenda, so I hope you've downloaded that. We're a wonderful club. We'd love to have you as members. And what better way to spend a nice Sunday afternoon than to spend it with Uniform and listen to great speeches and have a great time. So again, thank you so much, Dennis, and thank you for everyone joining us this afternoon. Take care. See you next time. And watch how you use that stage.
Come and visit. Come as a guest. First and third Tuesdays, Sundays, 3 o'clock, 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time.
Standard.
No, we're in daylight.
3 p.m.
3 p.m.
All right. Goodbye, everyone. I officially close this meeting.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thank you,
Take care.
Dennis.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Dennis.
For your
Thank you,
wonderful
Dennis.
presentation.
Thank you, Dennis.
Dennis.
Thanks,
Yes.
everyone. Thank you.